The whisper came from the dark. Not loud, not threatening. Just a voice, low, calm, impossibly close. It spoke the boy's name. No one else heard it. The room was full of people. Candles burned. Prayers were spoken. The night pressed against the windows like a listening ear. Yet when the whisper slipped through the silence, only the boy reacted, his breath catching, his eyes widening as if someone had leaned down beside him. "Did you hear that?" he asked. They told him no, but the whisper came again, this time closer, this time slower. And it knew things no stranger should know. The villagers would later swear the boy had always been quiet, observant, the kind of child who noticed shadows where others saw walls, the kind who listened when the forest went still. They didn't understand that some names, when spoken by the dark, are not invitations. They are claims. That night, Dracula did not knock. He did not enter. He did not reveal himself. He only whispered, and from that moment on, the boy was never alone again. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss our cinematic stories of suspense and horror. The boy's name was Elias. He was 10 years old, thin for his age, with dark hair that never stayed calm and eyes that lingered too long on empty corners of rooms. People said he was quiet. His mother said he was thoughtful. The truth was simpler. Elias listened. On the night the whisper first spoke his name, the village was awake. A storm had passed through earlier, leaving the air thick and damp. Candles burned in every house, not for fear, but for comfort. Thunder still echoed far beyond the hills, rolling like a memory that refused to fade. Elias sat at the kitchen table, while his mother stitched a tear in his coat. The clock ticked loudly on the wall. Each sound felt sharper than it should have. Then the whisper came. Elias. It was not inside his head. That was what frightened him most. The sound came from the space just behind his right ear. Warm, deliberate, intimate. Not rushed, not unsure. Elias stiffened. His mother did not look up. "Did you say something?" he asked. She shook her head, eyes still focused on the needle. "No, love." The whisper returned. "Elias." This time, it lingered on the final syllable, stretching it as though tasting it. The boy swallowed hard. His heart began to beat faster, but not with panic, with recognition. The sound felt old, familiar in a way he could not explain. "Who are you?" he whispered back. The room grew colder. The candle flame bent sideways, though no window was open. His mother frowned. "Elias, who are you talking to?" He opened his mouth to answer, and the whisper spoke again, closer than before. "Do not tell." Elias closed his mouth. No one," he said quickly. His mother studied him, concern creasing her brow. "You look pale. Go to bed." Elias nodded and stood, his legs trembling slightly as he climbed the narrow stairs. Every step creaked too loudly. Every shadow seemed deeper than it had been moments before. In his bedroom, the air felt different. He shut the door, lit the small candle by his bed, and sat down slowly. His reflection stared back at him from the darkened window, eyes wide, face tight with unasked questions. The whisper did not come again, at least not right away. Elias lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle and sigh. Just as sleep began to pull at him, the voice returned, no longer beside him, but everywhere. "You hear me because you listen." Elias squeezed his eyes shut. "Please go away." A pause, then a sound that might have been laughter, soft, breath-like. "I have already waited a long time," the voice said. "You are the first who heard." Elias turned on his side, clutching his blanket. "What do you want?" Another pause, longer this time. "I want nothing," the voice replied. "I am only reminding you of something you already know." The candle flickered violently, then steadied. "What do I know?" Elias asked, his voice barely audible. "That the dark is not empty." Silence followed. When Elias finally slept, he dreamed of a forest at dusk. Trees stood motionless. Their shadows stretched like fingers across the ground. At the center of the dream stood a tall figure, still and patient, watching him from a distance. Its eyes glowed faintly red. Morning brought no relief. Elias woke with a sensation of being watched. His dreams clung to him like fog. At breakfast, he barely touched his food. "Are you sick?" his mother asked. "No," he said, but he did not meet her eyes. On his way to school, he felt it again, the sense of presence, not behind him, not beside him, above. He glanced toward the rooftops, then the tree line beyond the village. Nothing, yet the feeling remained. At the edge of the road, old Marta stopped him. She stared at his face longer than politeness allowed. "You've been marked," she muttered. Elias frowned. "What?" She shook her head and stepped away, crossing herself quickly. That afternoon, the whisper returned one last time. "You did well," it said. "You did not scream." Elias closed his eyes. "Tomorrow," the voice continued, "you will hear me again." And far beyond the village, where the forest grew thick and old, something ancient smiled, because the boy had answered without ever speaking. Elias did not tell anyone about the second whisper, not his mother, not his teacher, not even the priest who stood at the school gate every morning, blessing children with tired eyes and steady hands. Some things, Elias sensed, grew stronger when spoken aloud. The day unfolded like any other, yet nothing felt ordinary. The village moved, spoke, and breathed as it always had. But Elias felt separated from it. As if a thin, invisible wall now stood between him and everyone else. At school, he sat by the window, staring at the line of trees beyond the fields. They looked darker than usual. Closer, their shadows pooled at the base of their trunks, like something waiting to spill forward. "Elias!" His teacher's voice startled him. "Yes," he answered too quickly. "You haven't written a word," she said gently. "Are you feeling well?" He nodded. "I'm just tired." She studied him for a moment, then turned back to the blackboard. Chalk scraped against slate, the sound sharp enough to make him flinch. Then, beneath it, almost woven into the noise, came the whisper. "Look at them," it said softly. "They do not hear." Elias's fingers tightened around his pencil. "Stop," he murmured under his breath. No one noticed. The whisper did not vanish. It moved. When Elias walked home at midday, it followed at a careful distance, never loud, never rushed. It spoke between sounds, between footsteps, between wind and birdsong, between one breath and the next. "You watch the shadows," it said. "That is why you hear me." Elias stopped walking. The road was empty. "Why me?" he asked quietly. The whisper seemed amused. "Because others learned to ignore." A chill slid down his spine. At the edge of the village, where the road narrowed and the forest began its slow encroachment, Elias felt the presence grow stronger. The air thickened, heavy with the smell of damp leaves and soil. He turned back. The village lay behind him, warm with smoke and sound. Ahead, the forest waited, silent, immense, patient. "Do not go," Elias whispered to himself. The whisper answered, "Not yet." Relief flooded him, sharp and unexpected. He hurried home, bolting the door behind him once inside. That night, the dreams returned. This time, the figure stood closer. The forest in Elias's dream breathed, branches rising and falling like ribs. The tall figure no longer watched from afar. It stood just beyond reach, its face still obscured, its eyes glowing softly like embers buried in ash. "You are learning," the voice said, not as a whisper now, but as a presence that filled the dream. Elias wanted to run, but his feet would not move. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. The figure tilted its head. "Listen." Elias woke with a gasp. The candle by his bed was extinguished. Darkness pressed in from all sides. Then came the whisper, clearer than ever. "You heard me again." Elias sat up, heart pounding. "Please, just tell me who you are." A pause, long enough for hope to flicker. "I am what remembers," the voice said. "When villages forget." The temperature in the room dropped. Elias's breath fogged in the air. "Are you Dracula?" he asked, the name trembling on his tongue. The whisper did not deny it. Instead, it answered with something colder. "Names are cages," it said. "But yes, that is one of mine." Elias pressed his back against the wall. Fear finally bloomed fully, hot and undeniable. "You won't hurt anyone," he said quickly. "Please." Another pause. "I have not," the whisper replied. "Not yet." Elias's stomach twisted. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because soon," the voice said, "you will be the only one who can hear the warning." The floorboards creaked softly, not from the house settling. From weight. Elias stared at the doorway. A shadow stretched across the floor, longer than any candle could cast. It did not move forward. It simply waited, as if respecting a boundary neither of them had named. "You do not scream," the whisper said. "You do not run." "I'm scared," Elias admitted. A sound like a sigh passed through the darkness. "So were the others," the voice said, before they forgot. The shadow withdrew. Warmth slowly returned to the room. When morning came, Elias found something new on his wrist. Not a mark, not a wound, just a faint sensation of being held. Like an invisible thread tied gently around him, pulling not toward danger, but toward listening. And far beyond the village, something ancient adjusted its patience. The whisper had followed, and now it would not stop. By the third day, Elias understood something was wrong with the world around him. Not broken, not cursed, muted. People spoke, but their words felt thin, like echoes of meaning rather than meaning itself. Laughter sounded rehearsed. Prayers sounded memorized. Even the church bell rang hollow, as if it no longer believed in its own warning. Elias sat on the church steps after school, watching villagers pass. He tried to imagine how it felt to be them, unaware, unlistening, safe in their ignorance. The whisper stirred. "They cannot hear because they do not want to." Elias flinched. "You don't know that." "I do," the voice replied calmly. "I have watched them choose silence for centuries." Elias clenched his fists. "Then make them listen." A pause followed, longer than usual. "Would you listen?" the whisper asked. "If the truth terrified you?" Elias had no answer. That night, the village gathered for evening prayer. Father Mihai stood at the altar, his voice steady, practiced. Candles glowed softly, painting the stone walls in warm light. Elias sat beside his mother, hands folded too tightly in his lap. As the prayer reached its final words, Elias heard it, not a whisper this time, a breath, cold and deliberate, right behind the altar. His head snapped up. Father Mihai continued praying, unaware. "Look," the whisper said. Elias's heart pounded. He stood slowly, eyes fixed on the space behind the priest. Shadows gathered there unnaturally, thickening as if the light itself was being swallowed. "Stop," Elias whispered urgently. No one heard. A figure began to form, not fully, not visibly, but suggested by absence, by darkness bending inward, by the sense that something tall and patient stood just beyond sight. Elias gasped. His mother gripped his arm. "Elias, sit down." "He's here," Elias said, voice shaking. "He's right there." The congregation turned. Nothing stood behind the altar. Murmurs rippled through the church. Father Mihai frowned. "Elias, you're frightening people." The whisper slid close to his ear. "They see only what comforts them." Elias shook his head violently. "You have to listen. He's warning us." The priest's expression hardened, not with anger, but with pity. The boy is overtired. Fear does this. Two men approached gently, guiding Elias back to his seat. The prayers resumed, louder now, faster, as if speed alone could outrun doubt. Elias felt something cold coil in his chest. They had chosen not to hear. Outside the church, night deepened. As the congregation dispersed, a scream shattered the quiet. It came from the far end of the square. A woman ran toward them, breathless, hair loose, eyes wild. "My son," she cried. "He won't wake up." They followed her to a small house near the fields. Inside, the boy lay in bed, eyes open, unblinking, his skin pale but unmarked. Alive, yet unreachable. "He keeps whispering," the mother sobbed. "But not to me." Elias stepped closer. The whisper surged. "Kneel," it said. Elias did. He leaned close to the boy's ear and listened. There was the same voice, distant now, stretched thin, not claiming, calling. "He can hear you," Elias said softly, "but you must answer." The boy's lips trembled. A breath escaped him. Then his eyes focused. The room erupted in gasps. The mother clutched her child, weeping. Father Mihai stared at Elias, as if seeing him for the first time. "What did you do?" the priest asked. Elias looked down at his hands. "I listened." That night, the whisper spoke differently. "You tried to warn them," it said. "You tried to save them." Elias swallowed, then stopped scaring them. A sound like a slow inhale filled the darkness. "I do not scare," the voice replied. "I announce." Elias felt the invisible thread tighten. "Soon," the whisper continued, "they will hear whether they wish to or not." In the forest beyond the fields, shadows gathered thicker than before. Trees leaned inward, listening. And Elias understood the truth that terrified him most. He was no longer just hearing the whisper. He was becoming its voice. Elias did not sleep. He lay awake, listening to the village breathe. Doors creaking, embers settling, distant wind moving through chimneys like a low, uneasy sigh. The whisper had gone quiet, which frightened him more than its presence ever had. Silence, he was learning, meant waiting. Near midnight, Elias slipped from his bed and padded to the window. Moonlight washed the road in pale silver. The forest beyond stood unnaturally still, its edges sharp, as if cut from the night rather than grown from it. "Please," Elias whispered into the dark. "I don't want this." The air responded, not with sound, but with pressure, a closeness that made his skin prickle. "You already chose," the whisper said at last. Elias shook his head. "I didn't." "You listened," the voice replied calmly. "That is the oldest choice." A soft knock came from below. Elias froze, not at the door, at the wall. 3 gentle taps, as if someone stood just outside the house, knocking where the shadows pooled deepest. His mother stirred in her sleep. Elias held his breath. "Do not wake her," the whisper warned, not cruelly, but firmly. Elias swallowed hard and crept downstairs. The house felt colder with each step. The candles were unlit, yet the room was not fully dark. Moonlight bent strangely, pooling where it shouldn't. The taps came again. Elias approached the wall slowly. "I won't help you hurt them," he said, his voice trembling but clear. A pause. Then, something like regret colored the whisper. "I have not asked you to." The shadow along the wall deepened, stretching upward into a suggestion of height, tall, impossibly tall. Elias could not see a face, but he felt eyes on him, focused and patient. "They are forgetting again," the whisper said. "Already." Elias clenched his fists, then remind them without fear. A long silence followed. "Fear," the voice said quietly, "is what remains when memory fails." The shadow receded slightly, as if considering him. "You wish to refuse," it continued. "That is good. It means you are still yours." Elias felt his heart pound. "Then let me go." "You will be let go," the whisper said. "After?" "After what?" Another pause. "After they hear." The tap stopped. Warmth slowly returned to the room. Elias sagged against the wall, breathing hard. At dawn, the village woke to something new. Not a scream, not a disappearance. A sound, low at first, so low it might have been mistaken for wind. It rolled through the streets, through stone and wood and bone, vibrating beneath footsteps and words alike. People stopped mid-sentence. "What is that?" someone asked. No one answered. The sound grew stronger near the forest's edge. It was not a voice, yet it carried intention, a deep resonance that pressed into the chest and refused to be ignored. Elias stood in the square, surrounded by villagers who looked suddenly unsure themselves. Hands trembled. Eyes darted toward the trees. Father Mihai crossed himself. "This is not natural." Elias felt the thread tighten, gentle but insistent. "It is time," the whisper said within him. "I won't," Elias whispered back. The sound surged. Windows rattled. Birds fled the rooftops in a dark wave. Then, as suddenly as it began, the sound stopped. Silence felt like a hell breath. From the forest, a figure stepped forward, not fully visible, not fully hidden, just enough for the villagers to understand what stood there. Tall, still, watching. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "It's him," someone whispered. The stories... Elias felt tears burn his eyes. "Please," he begged to whisper. "Not like this." The presence shifted, subtle, restrained. "They see now," it said, "because you did not scream." The figure did not advance. It did not threaten. It simply stood at the boundary, unmistakable and undeniable. Father Mihai felt at his knees. "We remember," he said hoarsely. "We remember." The figure remained for a moment longer, long enough to carve itself into memory, then withdrew into shadow. The forest stilled. Breath returned to the village. Elias collapsed onto the steps, exhausted. The whisper softened, receding. "You refused," it said, "and still you helped him here." Elias wiped his face. "Is it over?" "For now," the voice replied, as the villagers gathered around him. Confused, shaken, alive. Elias understood the truth. He could no longer escape. Refusal had not freed him. It had bound him more gently. Because the dark no longer needed to whisper so loudly, it had learned it could speak through him. After the figure vanished back into the forest, the village did not return to normal. It pretended to. People spoke in lowered voices, as if the night itself might overhear. Doors were barred earlier. Candles burned longer. Mothers kept children close, hands resting protectively on small shoulders whenever shadows stretched too far across the ground. And everywhere Elias went, eyes followed him, not with fear exactly, but with something heavier, expectation. "They say you stood closest," old Marta whispered as Elias passed the well, "that it didn't touch you." Elias said nothing. He had learned that words made things worse. "At night," the whisper returned, but changed. It no longer pressed. It no longer demanded. It waited. Elias lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to his own breathing. The silence inside him felt larger than before, as if something had hollowed out a space and refused to fill it. "Why me?" he asked quietly. The whisper answered from everywhere and nowhere. "Because you listen when others close their ears. That's not fair." "No," it agreed. "It never is." Elias turned onto his side. "If they remember now, why am I still needed?" The whisper hesitated. Memory fades. It said at last, "Fear dulls. Stories soften with time. But silence, true silence, must be carried." Elias closed his eyes tightly. "I don't want to be that." The whisper did not argue. The next morning, Father Mihai summoned him to the church. The building smelled of wax and old stone. Sunlight filtered through the stained glass, painting fractured colors across the floor. Reds like dry blood, blues like cold water. "You are not cursed," the priest said, hands folded tightly. "But you are marked." Elias swallowed. "Can it be taken away?" Father Mihai looked older than Elias remembered. "Some marks are not wounds. They are doors." "A door to what?" The priest's gaze drifted to the forest beyond the window, to remembrance. That afternoon, the dreams began. Elias dreamed of nights that were not his own, of villagers long dead, of children who had vanished and men who had sworn never to speak the name again. He saw the tall figure standing at edges, roads, rivers, thresholds, always watching, always waiting, and always silent. When Elias woke, his pillow was damp with tears he did not remember shedding. On the third night, the whisper spoke differently, not inside his head. From the corner of the room, Elias sat up, heart racing. The darkness there was deeper, thicker, as if it drank the moonlight. "You are afraid," the whisper said. "Yes," Elias replied, "but I won't run." A shape formed, not fully, not yet, just a suggestion of shoulders, of height. "That is why you were chosen," it said. Elias hugged his knees. "If I stay, will you stop taking children?" A long, heavy silence followed. "I do not take," the whisper said carefully. "I am what comes when they are not guarded." Elias clenched his jaw. "Then teach me how to guard them." The darkness shifted, surprised. You would stand between? I already am, Elias said. His voice shook, but it held. For the first time, the whisper sounded almost human. Then you must learn the cost. The room grew colder. Images flooded Elias's mind, futures branching like veins, years passing, villagers aging, children growing, forgetting, and Elias, older, alone, still listening. Loneliness, the whisper said. Suspicion, blame. They will thank you with fear and repay you with forgetting. Elias's chest hurt. And if I refuse now, he asked, the images faded. Then someone else will hear, the whisper said softly. Someone younger, someone less ready. Elias lowered his head. I'll do it, he whispered, but you don't get to be the only voice. The shadow paused. Agreed. From that night on, Elias began to speak, not of monsters, of boundaries, of locked doors and shared watches, of remembering why the forest was never entered at dusk. The villagers listened, uneasily at first, then with growing trust. They did not know why Elias knew what he knew, but they listened, and the whisper grew quieter. Not gone, never gone, but held, contained within a boy who carried the silence so others would not have to hear it. Yet deep in the forest, something ancient waited, because silence, once carried, is never truly released. Years passed, though the forest did not seem to notice. Elias grew taller. His shoulders broadened, his voice deepened, and the boy who once trembled at whispers became a young man who listened without fear. The villagers aged around him, marking time with wrinkles and funerals, while Elias became something harder to define. A boundary. They never called him that. Of course. They called him strange. They called him quiet. Some, in darker moments, called him touched. But when dusk fell too quickly, when a child lingered too long near the trees, it was Elias they sought. And every time he answered, the whisper remained, but it had changed. It no longer crept. It stood. On the final night, Elias knew before the sun fully set. The air felt heavier, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Birds fell silent. Even the forest seemed to lean inward, listening. Elias walked alone toward the edge of the trees. He did not carry a lantern. He did not need one. I'm here, he said into the dark. The figure emerged slowly, tall, pale, unmistakable now. No longer just a suggestion or shadow, but fully present. Eyes like embers buried in ash regarded Elias with ancient patience. You have done well, Dracula said. It was the first time he spoke the name aloud. Elias did not flinch. You said silence must be carried. I carried it. Yes, Dracula replied. And now the silence belongs to you. Elias felt the weight of the years settle in his chest. The nights of listening, the warnings given, the children who slept safely because someone else stayed awake. What happens now? Elias asked. Dracula stepped closer. The forest bent subtly toward him, roots tightening beneath the soil. You choose, he said, as all guardians must. Choose what? To remain, Dracula said softly, or to release. Elias swallowed. If I release it, what happens to them? The village will forget, Dracula said without cruelty. Slowly, gently, as they always do. And you? A pause, longer than any before. I will be heard again, Dracula said. Elias closed his eyes. He saw the future split once more. One path where he walked away, lived a normal life, loved, age died. The village would sleep peacefully for a time, until another child heard a whisper they were never meant to hear. The other path was quieter, lonelier, but safer. Elias opened his eyes. I won't release it, he said. Dracula studied him, something like respect flickering behind his gaze. You understand the cost. Yes. You will fade from their stories. I already have. You will stand at the edge forever. Elias stepped forward until they were face to face. Then stand with me. The forest inhaled sharply. Dracula's eyes widened, not in anger, but surprise. No one has ever asked that, he said. I'm not asking you to leave, Elias continued. I'm asking you to listen, to let the silence be shared. For a long moment, the world balanced on that choice. Then Dracula nodded, once. So be it. The night changed, not brighter, not warmer, quieter. From that moment on, the whisper was no longer command or temptation. It became a warning, passed between two watchers who stood on opposite sides of the same line. Years later, travelers would pass the village and notice something odd. Children laughed freely, but never near the forest at dusk. Doors were locked at night, but without panic. And at the edge of the trees, there was sometimes a man standing still, eyes sharp, listening. They never learned his name, and they never heard the other one, because some names once spoken echo forever, and some silences are kept alive, not by monsters, but by those brave enough to listen first.